Today we're going to look at this video from Secular Talk. This video only has 38,000 views, was put up about 2 weeks ago, and he's talking about inflation, and I've already reacted to videos from Secular Talk on this topic, but this was requested by one of my patrons over on Patreon. So we're going to check it out today, so let's get started.
Despite what you hear from the Biden administration, the economy is not doing great. Like, the thing that I look
SpaghettiOs!
I look at time and time again are the numbers that come out on people living paycheck to paycheck, people who can't afford a $500 or $1,000 emergency.
And I've talked about that before. It might be dated, but years ago I did a video talking about this common talking point that only 40% of Americans can afford a $400 emergency. I explained why, how that's very misleading when it's reported by people like Secular Talk.
Those numbers are always devastating when you look at those. Now, it's true that the stock market is doing well and the unemployment rate is low. But for the stock market doing well, that's more of a reflection of how the top 10% or maybe 20% of the country is doing.
Yeah, only the rich benefit from the stock market, apparently.
And the unemployment rate being low, yeah, that's good, but a lot of those jobs are like shitty gig economy jobs, and how many people are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs?
Now, I'm interested in this. I couldn't find much data on this topic, but he doesn't really seem to provide anything either. Maybe he's just, riffing, but how do we know? Are we sure that most of the jobs, a lot of the jobs, what explains the low unemployment is just shitty gig economy jobs?
How many people are underemployed, right? Like those facts kind of leave out that angle to it, which is kind of misleading. So to me, it's like, you see the 60 to 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, some gargantuan number can't afford a $500 emergency. Things are not as great as they're pretending that they are, okay?
All right, so let's unpack a few of these things. Let's start with this 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I see this talking point both on the left and on the right. And I think I've talked about it before, but this comes from a Lending Club report from February of 2023. 60% of Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck, down from 64% a month ago. And this is based on an analysis. It's based on a survey of 4,163 U.S. consumers conducted between January 6th and January 7th, as well as an analysis of other economic data. And the thing with this is there's conflicting data on this point. Matt Darling over on Elon Musk's website, he has 47,000 followers, senior employment policy analyst, chief neoliberal shill.
SpaghettiOs!
He responded to this when it was reported by Batya Ungar Sargon. The median American household has a net worth of $193,000. The median American household holds $8,000 in transaction accounts, meaning checkings or savings accounts. And I've seen this in one of the Federal Reserve ports from one of the last few years. This last point I know he gets from the Federal Reserve. 54% of adults claim to have cash savings that could pay for 3 months of expenses. And here's that report right here. As of 2022, 54% of adults in America say they have 3 months of emergency savings. Over half of U.S. adults, over half of U.S. households have over $8,000 in transaction accounts. Something's not adding up with the data we see from the Federal Reserve and the data from Lending Club report. But even if we're to run with this Lending Club report, this report also mentions that more than 4 in 10, over 40% of high-income consumers are living paycheck to paycheck. And then we also get reports like this from CNBC from late last year, 2023, from Charlotte Morabito. Here's why even Americans making more than $100,000 live paycheck to paycheck. And the article talks about how it's a result of lifestyle inflation. Basically, for a lot of people, when they move up into higher paying brackets, when they make more money, they don't adjust their spending habits. They just spend more the more they make. Then we also got this report from Lending Club that reports that 29% of Gen Z consumers living paycheck to paycheck cite non-essential spending as a cause for financial distress. So, one, this talking point doesn't really add up when you see other economic data from the Federal Reserve. Not really sure what exactly the problem is. And even if we run with these reports from Lending Club, it looks like for a lot of people, because, when people like Kyle bring this up, he brings it up to suggest that a significant amount of Americans are struggling, and I'm sure a lot of Americans are struggling, but this report from Lending Club, and also these reports from CNBC, and also other reports from Lending Club suggest that a big deal of this, a big cause of this, is people just not managing their spending habits wisely. If even people who are making six figures, more than enough to live comfortably in most of America, if they're living paycheck to paycheck, then you can't really blame it on bad income or inflation or whatever. Now, as for this talking point about, he said, the stock market's good, but that only really helps the top 10, top 20% or whatever. I've talked about this before because I remember Jon Stewart making a similar boneheaded comment. And I brought up the fact that the majority of Americans across all age brackets have some sort of retirement savings based on data from the Federal Reserve. 62% of Americans from age 18 to 29 have some sort of retirement savings. 75% of Americans 30 to 44 have some retirement savings. 84% 45 and above have retirement savings. It sort of drops off when retirement savings are on track. Only 30% of Americans, 30% of Americans age 18 to 29 have their retirement savings on track. 39% of adults 30 to 44, and it increases the older they get. Still not an insignificant amount. On top of that, we got reports from last year from Axios from October of 2023. A record share of U.S. households now own stocks. And we got a chart right here based on the Federal Reserve. 58% of Americans own some sort of stock. Then we got this article from the Motley Fool, also from late last year, November of 2023. 158 million Americans own stock, although it also gives Kyle's point a little credibility. The wealthiest 1% own more than half. We scroll down here. They base this off of data from Gallup. Gallup also reports on this. 61% of Americans own some sort of stock. And they break it down right here. 158 million Americans, or 61% of U.S. adults, own stock. But the top 1% does hold over 54% of stocks. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of U.S. adults only hold 0.6% of the total stocks. At the same time, U.S. families held a median value of $52,000 in stocks, which again, to me, does not sound like an insignificant amount of money. So yeah, you could say that the richest of the rich, they do have the most skin in the game when it comes to the stock market, but it also looks like the majority of Americans also benefit from stock market gains. Many Americans have a lot invested in the stock market, according to various sources, which is worth keeping in mind, not just because Kyle is wrong when he talks like this, but Kyle is also going to frown upon greedy corporations doing stuff like paying dividends to shareholders.
Let's just say that. Well, Judd Legum wrote a phenomenal piece here on his site, Popular Information, and it dives into really the core of the problem here. One of the persistent problems that people keep talking about is inflation, right? Like, oh, when I go to the grocery store, I'm paying way more than I used to, and I don't like that, and that's hurting my wallet or my pocketbook or whatever. He lays out how we got here. Look at this. Corporate profit bonanza. In the last 3 months of 2023, after-tax corporate profits reached an all-time high of $2.8 trillion. This is part of a long-term growth in corporate profits that began in the 1980s, picked up steam at the turn of the millennium, and exploded since 2020. So remember, there is inflation, and they argue, oh God, bro, we got to raise the prices, bro. We got no choice, bro. Well, Judd Legum just told you
Yeah, Judd Legum said it.
After-tax corporate profits are at an all-time high.
Yeah.
It's not like they have these tiny profit margins and hey, there's inflation, we have to raise the prices to keep our tiny profit margin. All-time high corporate profits.
Yeah, all-time high.
Profits. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, all-time high. All-time high. Now, keep in mind, he's talking about corporate profits collectively, which, as we'll get into, probably not the best way to analyze things. We also know that not all corporations are doing well. When we read stories about how the 99-cent store in the Southwest United States is closing all of its locations. You know, who knew it was so easy? Maybe the executives, the suits who make these decisions for the 99-cent stores, maybe they should be watching Secular Talk, because maybe they would have said, hey, this is easy. Because if you read the reports, it's largely a result of inflation and other complications stemming from COVID. Reason why they're closing down all these stores. But had they been watching Secular Talk or other asshats like Robert Reich, the suits over at 99 cents, they could have said, oh, wow, this is easy. All we have to do is jack up prices and we can make record profits. Maybe just rebrand the store. Just call it the $1.99 store or the $2.99 store. You know, easy stuff. And it's not just the 99-cent store. We also have Red Lobster. I guess according to recent reports on Yahoo Finance from Reshmi Basu, Red Lobster is considering bankruptcy.
Uh-oh, spaghetti-o.
Which, again, is strange because if you watch commentators like Secular Talk, you would get the impression that all corporations are doing great because they're all making record profits. But as it turns out, corporations do not collectively share in successes and failures. So yeah, I guess if you run a corporation like Red Lobster or 99 cents, pay attention to Kyle. He's giving some good business advice. Just jack up prices and you'll make record profits. And consumers won't know the difference.
Look at the chart. Look at the chart.
Yeah, look at it.
Corporate profits after tax.
Just look at that chart. No, I'm serious, folks. I'm not. You should really look at this chart. Yeah, notice any trends pop out to you since the 1980s, 1990s?
Look at this.
Look at it.
1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and then... So they say it really started with Reagan, but then massive uptick in the George W. Bush years, and then the crash with the Great Recession, and then boom, after the Great Recession, just total skyrocket job under a little bit under Obama, under Trump, and now under Biden. Look at this chart.
Yeah, look at it.
This corporate profits chart is absurd.
It is absurd. And I would ask, what exactly is absurd about this chart? And I got the chart right here. I got it on an annual basis. What's interesting about this chart is that this is not even the biggest jump in profits in recent history. So in 2020, corporate profits after tax was totaled at about $2.187 trillion. By 2023, that increased to just under $3 trillion. Based on my calculations, that's a 36% increase from 2020 to 2023. And yet this coincides with a massive jump in inflation from 1.2% in 2020 to 4%. Did I see that right? 4.69% in 2021 and 8% in 2022. Yet if you look at prior periods, which Kyle alludes to himself in here, if you go from 2000, when corporate profits totaled at $553 billion, by 2006, that almost tripled to $1.463 trillion. Not exactly tripled, but definitely more than doubled over a 6-year span. Yet if you look at the inflation rate over that same time, it went from 3.37% in 2000 to 3.22% in 2006, fluctuated a little downward. So isn't that interesting? We get a massive climb in corporate profits from 2000 to 2006, all while inflation either stayed the same or went down a little bit. And you notice a similar trend from 1990 to 1997, 1998. 1990, the inflation rate was 5.4%. By 1997, that went down to 2.33%. Yet corporate profits over that same period went from $283 billion in 1990 to $592 billion to 1997. So this absurd jump in profits is not unprecedented in recent history. And when we've seen it in the past, we haven't seen a massive spike in inflation. We haven't seen a massive spike in prices. What is unprecedented is that around 2020, America's political leaders decided to impose lockdowns on much of society, which resulted in a reduced supply in goods and services. And to make up for all of the struggling Americans and unemployment, these same political leaders stimulated demand by injecting trillions of dollars into the economy through various relief packages. And while we're here, I guess since Kyle thinks this jump in profits is so absurd, I guess might be worth asking how much corporations are allowed to make. Are we going to measure this based on total profits? Are we going to measure this on based of percentage of gains? You know, who is this guy, Kyle Kulinski, to tell Americans how much money they're allowed to keep? I thought this was America. But overall, I think Kyle needs to push this correlation-causation fallacy to excuse, perhaps distract from the possibility that inflation might be a result of generous spending programs that he himself cheerled for.
That's just not smart.
So here's what he says. Notably, the surge in corporate profits since 2020 has been fueled in part by expanding corporate profit margins. Last year, corporate profit margins, excluding the financial sector, were over 15%.
15%, you guys.
A level not seen since the 1950s. This is because the increases in prices for goods and services have outpaced the increase in costs, both labor and non-labor for corporations. According to an analysis from the Groundwork Collaborative, corporate profits drove 53% of inflation during the second and third quarters of 2023, and more than one-third since the start of the pandemic. Okay, do you understand that?
Yeah, you guys getting this?
Corporate profits drove 53% of inflation.
Yeah, amazing that he stops there and doesn't mention that this was during a particular 3-month window between the second and third quarters of 2023. And I've looked at the source that he gets this from, the Groundwork Collaborative. Yeah, isn't it amazing how he shifts the window there, shifts the goalposts? You know, when people talk about inflation, they usually talk between the period of 2020 to now. And now he's laser focused on 1 quarter in 1 year, 2023, even though we already got reports of inflation well before that. But it's not clear to me where they get this 53% figure from. On top of that, this report made sure to emphasize that for many commodities and services, producers' prices have actually decreased, which is technically true. It decreased a little right here from 2022 to 2023. Decreased a little bit, but it's still rather high when compared to pre-COVID levels, as you can see on this chart from the Federal Reserve for Economic Data. And you got to wonder why they're emphasizing this point about the producer price index, the fact that they went down a little bit. And I'm just speculating here, but I imagine that they do this because they want to put the thought in your head that, hey, if producer prices have decreased, then why are consumer prices increasing? Well, obviously, it must be due to corporate greed. So I'm not sure if I buy into the source that Kyle is talking about, but even if we take it at face value, I'm not sure if it proves Kyle's overall point.
That's something you didn't know. That's not, the thing you hear all the time. Oh my God, bro. Big government spending, bro. Leading to inflation, bro. Big government spending, bro.
See, now he's trying to downplay it.
Big government spending is bad, bro.
That's the one thing that's unprecedented over the last 30 to 40 years. The jump in corporate profits is not unprecedented, but the lockdowns And the generous relief spending is unprecedented. But yeah, it must be corporate greed's fault.
How many times have you heard this? You hear this all the time. That's not the problem here. He continues, in the 4 decades prior to the pandemic, corporate profits contributed to just 11% of price increases. Theoretically, this should not happen. Corporations should not be able to dramatically increase their profit margins by increasing prices because competitors should step in with lower prices and steal market share. So what's going on? Greg Ip, who writes about economics for the Wall Street Journal, suggests that corporations are collectively taking advantage of consumer psychology. Supply shocks related to the pandemic created widespread cost increases that consumers accepted. Although those supply shocks...
And again, why didn't Red Lobster and the 99-cent store just do this then?
...have dissipated. Many businesses have maintained higher prices anyway. In other words, this isn't about the pandemic. This isn't about the supply chain. Now they're just keeping prices high because they feel like they can. Quote, if people are paying $3 for a dozen eggs last week, they'll pay $3 this week. And firms take advantage of that. Yale University economist Mike Sinkinson explained, this kind of informal collusion works best in concentrated industries. The Groundwork Collective highlights the diaper industry where Procter & Gamble & Co. and Kimberly-Clark Corp. Control 70% of the domestic market. So
now we're going to talk about Kimberly-Clark and Procter & Gamble. I think I talked about these companies when reacting to a Robert Reich video about inflation.
This is an oligopoly, is what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's an oligopoly.
Diaper prices have increased by more than 30%, from $16.50 per package to nearly $21. This was initially driven by an increase in the price of wood pulp, a key input for diapers, but also paper towels and toilet paper. But since January 2023, prices for wood pulp have declined by 25%. But P&G and Kimberly-Clark are not reducing diaper prices. Instead, they are bragging to investors about their massive profits.
Yeah, massive profits. So, are we getting this? Kimberly-Clark and Procter & Gamble, their input costs are reportedly going down, yet they're not lowering prices, so they must be just a bunch of greedy jerks who know that they can keep prices high because then they can make massive profits, record profits. And yet if we look at Kimberly-Clark's net income stats on macro trends, according to data from macro trends, Kimberly-Clark's net income for 2023 actually declined by almost 9% from 2022. So they saw a decline in profits in 2023. This is where Secular Talk's whole analysis starts to unravel a bit, because now he's focusing on two companies that are keeping prices high so that they can make massive profits, or all-time record profits, as he alluded to earlier. Yet if you look at some of these individual companies, like Kimberly-Clark, they actually saw a decline in profits in 2023. And if you look at the data down here, going all the way back to 2009, their annual profits, Kimberly-Clark has not had a $2+ billion year since 2020. And before 2020, between 2013 and 2019, they had 4 years where they did over $2 billion in profits. Doesn't sound like they're making massive profits, but definitely not record profits. Sounds like they were doing better before the COVID years, before inflation really got out of control. And Secular Talk also mentioned Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble also in 2023 saw a slight decline in profits. Smaller decline than Kimberly-Clark, just a 0.62% decline. Again, you'd think that'd be through the fucking roof because they saw a decrease in input costs for their diapers, yet they kept prices high. And they're bragging about their record profits. And same thing, if we go to this data going back to 2009, it does look like Procter & Gamble has been making more money since the pandemic. Still not record years. They made even more money in 2017 before inflation went a little too crazy. Looks like Procter & Gamble is a little more all over the place than Kimberly-Clark. At the same time, if we look at some of the most profitable companies in the world, according to sources like Investopedia from last October 2023, the two top most profitable companies in the world are Apple and Microsoft. And if we look at Apple's net income on macro trends, they are making ungodly amounts of money. If you notice down here, going back to 2009, before 2020, between 2014 and 2020, Apple was making anywhere between 40 and 60 billion dollars in annual profits. Since 2021, Apple has seen a more than 15% increase in annual profits. Since 2021, Apple's been making 94 to $99.8 billion a year. Yet if you look at Apple's trends when it comes to the pricing on some of their products, if we look at some of their products like, say, the MacBook Air, this is a press release from Apple all the way back in 2019 pre-COVID where they were talking about the new MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. The price for the introductory level MacBook Air back in 2019, the MacBook Air started at $1,099. The MacBook Pro started at $1,299. Fast forward to 2024, and the MacBook Air starts at $999. We also see a similar trend with the Mac Mini. This is a press release from October of 2018 talking about how the new Mac Mini packs a huge punch. And this press release reports that the Mac Mini will start at $799. Yeah, you fast forward today to 2024, you can get a new Mac Mini. Get a brand new Mac Mini for $599. The tier above that is $799. Now, with the MacBook Pro and the iMac, from what I can tell, we have seen some slight price increases for the MacBook Pro and the iMac. At the same time, the quality of those products has improved. The MacBook Pro and I think the iMacs, they're a little larger than they were pre-COVID, hence the price increases on those products. We see a similar trend with the iPhone. This article from 2019 on The Verge reports the new iPhone 11, iPhone 11 Pro, and Pro Max phones start at $699, $999, and $1,099 respectively. The thing is that if you read this article, you'll see that the iPhone 11 started, they had a 64 gigabyte model available. And if you fast forward to 2024, the iPhone 15 starts at $799, but the starting option for the iPhone 15 is 128 gigabytes. So yeah, the starting price is a little higher, but also their minimum standards are also higher than they were 5 years ago. So a more, you could say, apples to apples comparison might be with the iPhone Pro, which in 2019, the iPhone 11 Pro started at $999. And in 2024, the iPhone 15 Pro starts at $999. And going back to the Investopedia article, the second company in the world when it comes to most profitable companies in the world is Microsoft. And again, if we look at trends data from Macro Trends, their annual income going back to 2009, between 2014 and 2020, Microsoft was making anywhere between $12 and $45 billion in annual income. Since 2021, however, Microsoft has made $61 billion to $72 billion in annual income each year. Again, much more higher increase than 15% as far as I can tell. Yet, if we can see similar trends with certain Microsoft products. According to The Verge, back in, what was this? This was put up on, in 2019, October of 2019, the Microsoft Surface Pro 7 started at $749. Today, you can find a Microsoft Surface Pro 9 starting at $749. And I have also seen similar trends with the Xbox. When the Xbox One was introduced, Microsoft Xbox One was introduced, the price point was not much different. I don't think any different than the new Xbox Series X and Series S models. So it looks like in many cases, Kyle's analysis falls apart when you look at trends within individual companies.
In July 2023, P&G predicted $800 million in windfall profits because of declining input costs. Wow. This is why you need a windfall profits tax. In October 20...
A windfall profits tax. What makes Kyle think, and I'm genuinely curious, what makes anyone think because they've kicked this idea around here in the great state of California to deal with gasoline prices. Gavin Newsom and the Democrats here in California want to impose a windfall profits tax on the greedy oil companies. Because I guess big oil, as I've talked about before, they've noticed that they can rip off people in California, yet everyone else in the country who many states have less than half the price for a gallon of gasoline in their states. I guess they just realized that Californians are a lot dumber and more gullible when it comes to prices at the pump. So yeah, the windfall profits tax, people with political power are kicking that idea around. But especially when we talk about companies like Apple and Microsoft, they have made massive profits over the last few years, yet they have not increased their prices. Yet if we look at a company like Disney, I think Disney is another company to consider on this topic. There have been many reports over the years about how Disney, they've been raising ticket prices for their theme parks, and they have raised prices on their streaming services for Disney Plus and Hulu and ESPN Plus. Disney has been raising prices over the last 5 years, yet if you look at data from macro trends going all the way back to 2009, Disney has yet to come anywhere close to its pre-COVID profits. Before 2020, Disney was making $11 billion in 2019, $12 billion in 2018. And they have yet to clear, as we can see, they have yet to clear $4 billion in annual profits. Lost $2 billion, almost $3 billion in 2020. Yet Disney's been increasing prices. And especially if we impose this windfall profits tax chicanery. So let's get this straight. Companies like Apple and Microsoft, who have made ungodly amounts of profits, yet have not increased the prices for their goods and services, they would be subject to this windfall profits tax, yet companies like Disney who have increased prices, they presumably would not because they are not making massive profits, record profits. I mean, just on paper, why would a company, you're talking about windfall profits tax. I assume they're going to be imposed long after all of their sales have been processed and transacted. Why would a company then decide to lower prices after the government has taken more money from them?
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, dude.
And in practice, it would punish companies who are not increasing their prices, and companies that have increased their prices would not pay for it. Just wonderful stuff from good old secular talk over here.
2023, Kimberly-Clark acknowledged that its input costs were coming down, but said that its products were still priced appropriately at that higher rate. Similar dynamics are playing out in many other industries, including new and used cars, groceries, and housing. So he continues here. How corporations are using...
So did we get that? So we're talking about what? New and used cars, housing, and groceries. And not to beat this dead horse, but I've talked about this before. Yeah, these are usually three of the biggest areas, three of the areas in the economy where inflation has hit the hardest, so to speak. Yet two of these things, houses and used cars, are not largely determined by corporations, by corporate greed, despite what many may try to lead you to believe. All this hogwash about big greedy firms like Blackstone and BlackRock and others driving up the price of housing by entering the market so that they can buy up all the housing. This is a topic that Actual Justice Warrior has talked about multiple times. I've even seen recent articles talk about this. No, Wall Street investors are not buying all of the homes, including articles on the Wall Street Journal. Some of the data from these articles reflect this. But house prices are largely determined by individual buyers and sellers of houses. As for used cars, I had trouble finding reliable data on this topic about how much used car prices are determined by large retailers, large car companies. I found this article on Cox Automotive, which reports that roughly 45% of used vehicle sales are private party, neighbor-to-neighbor deals, but the growing majority of retail sales are closed at dealerships. Also found this article from McKinsey & Company that claims that the top 20 used car retailers have less than 20% market share in America, which leads me to believe that a lot of used car prices are probably determined by individual buyers and sellers. So I'm not sure we can scapegoat corporate greed for that either. And even if we look at individual large car companies like Ford Motors, again, we take a look at macro trends. So Ford, it looks like they did have record profits in 2021. They had almost $18 billion. Then in 2022, they lost. They didn't see a decline in profits. They straight up lost just under $2 billion. Although, as we can see, Ford bounced back in 2023 with $4.3 billion. Still not anywhere close to its pre-COVID levels, which fluctuated between $4.5 billion to over $7 billion. In some cases, over $10 billion, as we can see. Then we have General Motors, which also I guess they had an increase in 2023. They did make record profits in 2023 after seeing a decline in 2022. Overall, it seems like they're not much higher than they were in 2015 or 2016. Toyota Motors, on the other hand, looks to be just crushing it. I mean, look at that jump in recent quarters. My goodness. Toyota Motors in 2023 made $18 billion, $25 billion in 2022. So yeah, Toyota is crushing it. Although they were still making around the same amount of money pre-COVID, so it's not exactly like they're making record profits. Although, again, they did have an all-time high in 2022, then saw a big decline in 2023. As for groceries, large grocery retailers like Kroger, from what I can tell, it looks like they have not had a $3 billion year since the pre-COVID years. And then we have a company like Walmart, which has been making a little more money since their pre-COVID years, but still not record profits. Their best days were between 2010 and 2014, according to data from Macro Trends. Walmart has also been reportedly credited for trying to keep prices low. I've talked about this in other videos when talking about inflation. It's from 2021. Walmart and Target clash with investors over strategy to keep prices low despite inflation. Then we got this from Motley Fool in 2023, how Walmart plans to keep prices low this year. Walmart has even been credited by NBC News for pushing back against its suppliers who have wanted them to raise their prices. So overall, it looks like we have mixed results when it comes to housing, cars, groceries, which again makes me even more skeptical about these claims that inflation is, it's all the blame on corporate greed.
Their windfall. It's possible for corporate profits to be used productively to fuel innovation and growth, but that doesn't appear to be happening. Economist Christian Weller notes that corporations are using their record profits mainly to pay dividends to their shareholders and build up their stockpiles of cash.
Oh no, guys! Corporations are paying dividends to shareholders! Ooh! Can't have that. Can't have that. Can't have shareholders getting paid. Can't have Americans making returns on their investments. And going back to what I said earlier, you know, the majority of Americans have stock, own stock. They have skin in the stock market gain. Sounds like good news to the majority of Americans. You know, with Kyle being all bent out of shape over corporations making record profits and paying dividends to their shareholders, you might get the impression that good old Kyle over here would prefer that the majority of Americans make even less money.
What an asshole!
Between December 2019 and December 2023, non-financial corporations used almost half of their pre-tax profits to pay dividends to investors. That is the
What a bunch of monsters.
highest share of corporate profits devoted to dividends since the 1950s. The same group of corporations now has $7.2 trillion in cash, up from $6.1 trillion in 2019, adjusted for inflation. Meanwhile, capital expenditures, which is a key way corporations invest in the future, are at historic lows relative to profit. In layman's terms, they're just price gouging the shit out of you.
Yeah.
they're just price gouging the shit out of you.
Keep in mind, small businesses have also had to raise prices.
In light of these record corporate profits, the government has a few choices. It could choose to raise corporate tax rates and use the funds to help people in need.
And I think Kyle's going to mention this, but they have already done that with the Inflation Reduction Act. Put a minimum tax on corporations that make over $1 billion in annual profits. But I guess that wasn't enough.
Such as children in poverty. In March, Biden released a proposal that would raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. Biden's proposal also includes raising the minimum tax for corporations with $1 billion in profits or more from 15 to 21%.
Oh, so I guess that wasn't enough, the initial one.
The government could also choose to maintain the current corporate tax rate of 21%, which was established by the Trump administration in 2017 in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Trump wants voters to believe that if he is reelected, he will not prioritize corporate tax cuts. In January, Bloomberg reported that Trump plans to keep corporate tax levels unchanged and appeal to working and middle-class voters. What a sentence that is. Stephen Moore, an economic advisor to Trump.
Now, keep in mind, so their solution to inflation, I guess, is just tax. I guess we're just going to tax the American economy into prosperity. Even if we buy into this notion that corporate profits are to blame for inflation, why would taxing those profits, again, result in inflation falling? Why would that result in prices coming down? Aren't taxes often imposed for the explicit effort to punish the customer, to discourage the customer from engaging in some sort of activity? Notably with the carbon tax. The carbon tax, a reason why we have carbon taxes, I think the main reason we have carbon taxes, at least according to Tax Foundation, it puts a price on those emissions to encourage consumers, businesses, and governments to produce less of them. And you see a similar thing with sin taxes when they're imposed on stuff like alcohol, tobacco, and large sodas, is meant to discourage customers from consuming those products. We have import taxes that are often imposed to discourage people from buying from foreign companies so that they buy from American companies. Hell, even here in Los Angeles, back in 2022, we got a mansion tax. The voters of Los Angeles decided to impose a mansion tax, and now we're starting to see that it's only made the housing crisis in Los Angeles even worse. This is another video that Actual Justice Warrior recently did on, which was pretty good stuff. And on top of that, Kyle mentioned about how, with all that tax money, with all that revenue, we can use that to help feed families, feed hungry children. Yet it might be worth noting that according to USA Facts, spending on programs like SNAP has dramatically increased since the COVID years, going from $60 billion in 2019 to $113 billion in 2023. Even the monthly benefit per person amount has increased dramatically from $129 in 2019 to $211 in 2023. And I imagine, someone like Kyle, they might respond to that like, yeah, we're already spending money in all this and it's already increased, but what if we gave families and children even more money? The point I'm making is that if you watch, commentary like this, you might get the impression, that we're not already spending a lot of money on these programs.
Trump told the Washington Post that Trump said that he really wants to focus more on small businesses and the corporation, that he's fine with the corporate rate where it is. The government could also choose to cut the corporate tax rate even further and facilitate even larger corporate profits. Trump has expressed interest in lower corporate tax rates, perhaps as low as 15%. And then you say Project 2025, that's, part of their whole spiel. So, look, what's the takeaway here? Who's to blame for the inflation? The corporations.
Yes, the corporations.
What we're seeing here is mostly what's called greedflation.
Yeah, greedflation.
Which is just, hey, we took advantage of the mass psychology of the population and the news hyping up the idea that there is inflation. We raised prices across the board, even for things that weren't actually impacted by inflation. We raised the prices because we felt like we could and we can get away with it. And then now, it's not like the raw goods that go into making a product, it's not like those prices are still high. They've come back down.
No, they're still high, as I demonstrated earlier.
But we're still charging you.
They went down a little bit from 2022 to 2023. They're still much higher than they were pre-COVID. I mean, this guy is literally the Greedflation meme that Noah Smith often puts out right here. And how would this explain? You got to wonder, how would this explain countries that have been hurt, that have been hit by inflation the most? On top of that, have been dealing with horrible inflation rates for years, even well before COVID. Like, according to this article on Forbes from just earlier this year, which countries have the highest interest and inflation rates? Now, if we scroll down, the highest inflation rates are countries like Venezuela, 189.8% inflation. Venezuela, been crippled by inflation for years, even before COVID. And I guess you could say maybe it's all the big greedy corporations in Venezuela who are making money hand over fist by just jacking up prices and squeezing customers in, unfettered, unregulated capitalist Venezuela. Oh, yeah, that's right. Venezuela has been governed by socialist asshats for decades at this point. You also notice Argentina is in there. Argentina, which I've already seen Secular Talk try to scapegoat Javier Milei for all the economic problems in Argentina, even though he's only been president for a few months at this point, while Argentina has had economic problems, including inflation, for decades. On top of that, we got, Zimbabwe, Sudan, Turkey are all dealing with crushing levels of inflation. I guess all those countries are just being really crippled by corporate greed.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, dude.
I guess, is that how we explain all these countries? And this is not a new phenomenon. When looking into the history of Iran a few years ago, I found out that prior to the revolution, the Shah's massive government spending programs ultimately resulted in inflation. And then when inflation hit Iran, the Shah and the government tried to scapegoat greedy businesses for jacking up prices because, why take accountability for the failures of your policies or the policies that you cheerlead for when you can just, point to others and call them out for the sin of being greedy and selfish?